In the end, the Singapore Grand Prix will certainly not go down in history for its entertainment and surprises. On the overtaking front, there was a bit more action than in the past, with the addition of a fourth DRS zone. But generally, the race followed a predictable script. Lando Norris, after finally managing to hold the lead on the first lap, which is already news, left the group behind and embarked on a completely solitary escape, showcasing the literally astronomical performance level that McLaren has now achieved on a track that isn't very demanding aerodynamically. Norris lapped everyone up to 8th place on a roughly 5-kilometer track with lap times around 1 minute and 40 seconds, a remarkable feat considering that it rarely happened lately due to the tighter grid, a true dominance. Behind him was an excellent Verstappen, regaining a performance worthy of his level, with an RB20 unable to keep pace with the MCL38, but still transformed from Friday to Saturday in a way that made it manageable for the 3-time world champion. The engineers at Milton Keynes chose to shift the balance from mechanical to aerodynamic, heavily loading the latter and stiffening the suspension, giving Verstappen a car that reacted as he expected, which was enough to carefully manage a second place that, from a championship perspective, is as valuable as a victory given the weekend's premises. In the other garage, Sergio Perez had a nightmare weekend, starting from qualifying and continuing into a lackluster race, unable to find the necessary pace to attack Haas's excellent Nico Hülkenberg, as the Mexican pointed out over the radio, with the stiff setup causing a bounce over the track's bumps, making it virtually impossible for him to find good traction out of corners. Max Verstappen easily overcame Oscar Piastri and the Mercedes, with the Australian wasting a front-row start in qualifying due to a mistake at the penultimate corner and suffering throughout the first stint behind George Russell. The Brackley team had a fluctuating and not entirely clear approach to the Singapore weekend. The relatively low downforce setup seemed to pay off in lap times, with excellent traction and acceleration compensating for deficits in slow sections. However, the W15 only shone with Hamilton during his qualifying lap and never seemed to have the pace of the leaders. The strategy chosen for Hamilton at the start of the race, starting on soft tires, also appeared somewhat puzzling since George Russell started behind the 7-time champion, and it turned into a half ordeal for Lewis Hamilton, with an incredibly long second stint and finishing in 6th after starting 3rd, yielding positions to Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and Charles Leclerc. This isn't the first time this year that Brackley strategists have come up with unprofitable ideas, especially when it seems they lack clarity on performance windows and setups. Overall, the Mercedes setup can't be deemed wrong, but compared to those ahead and Ferrari, they were clearly the slowest. However, they ended with a higher points total than Ferrari, thanks to a total blackout on Saturday for the Maranello team, partially recovered with a strong race. The analysis of Ferrari is actually very simple this time. The SF24 was likely the second fastest car on track at the 4.94-kilometer Marina Bay Street Circuit, potentially battling with Lando Norris, but more probably just behind, either in front of or in contention with Max Verstappen. Clearly, everything was ruined by qualifying, with Carlos Sainz hitting the wall and Charles Leclerc facing all the issues we saw on Saturday. The race for the Reds was, in fact, one of the best of the year, with both drivers on different strategies from those around them, and both were correct, allowing them to recover positions. Interestingly, the average lap times during the second stint were almost identical among Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, and Charles Leclerc, but each faced different conditions, with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen managing their pace while Leclerc was fighting to catch Russell on fresher tires, only to get blocked at the end of the race when he couldn't pass. Ferrari team principal Frédéric Vasseur believes the Reds' pace was comparable to Lando Norris's, but there's some doubt about whether the Englishman was truly vulnerable, given his exceptional form throughout the Marina Bay weekend. Obviously, Ferrari wasted an important opportunity, even just for a podium and valuable points. Given Charles Leclerc's statements after the race, where he retracted his earlier nervousness, some doubt remains about the responsibility for what happened to the Monegasque. In hindsight, simply avoiding track limits at the start of the lap would have helped him gain 2 grid positions, allowing him to start right in front of Fernando Alonso, keeping him closer to the podium area instead of giving the leaders a half-minute advantage in the first stint. During qualifying, Charles Leclerc lacked grip in the first sector, indicating something went wrong with the tires from the moment he left the pits, but the Monegasque's all-or-nothing mindset, which clearly affected his clarity during the lap, troubled by tire preparation issues, does not yield good results in such a tightly contested Formula One. Seeing such a strong Ferrari fighting desperately to secure fifth place is something that stirs frustration and agitation. From the moment Charles Leclerc fitted the hard Pirelli tires, just after halfway through the race, his lap times were consistently the same or better than those of Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. This suggests that if Charles had been ahead, he could have at least fought for second place, making life difficult for McLaren, or at the very least stayed close, waiting for an opportunity. But no, the Ferrari that returns from Singapore with Charles Leclerc's modest fifth place, and Carlos Sainz's even more modest seventh place, is a Ferrari that leaves you speechless because it's clear they threw away a golden opportunity. A bit like they did a week earlier in Baku, but in a different way. Here, Ferrari lost everything the day before when Carlos Sainz crashed immediately, and Charles Leclerc saw his best time, which wasn't exceptional, cancelled for exceeding track limits. Both drivers blamed the cold tires. Was it the Maranello team's fault for poor tire preparation? The doubt lingers, heightened by Charles Leclerc's comments, who, unprompted, sought to clear the team's personnel from blame after the race. After the Singapore Grand Prix, Formula One now faces a second break of about a month, similar to the summer one in August, but with the crucial difference that there is no mandatory shutdown. This means teams can continue to develop for what will likely be the last round of aerodynamic updates on a perfect track to test them. The Circuit of the Americas in Texas is very demanding both aerodynamically, with its many long, fast corners, and mechanically, with a track surface and curbs that are always very difficult to manage. From there, we will understand what to expect for the end of the 2024 Formula One season and who will really be the favorite for the titles, although currently the constructor's title seems to be in McLaren's hands, while the driver's title is in Max Verstappen's. But in such a unique year, anything can happen. Before wrapping up the Singapore Grand Prix, we wanted to add two notes about two particular drivers. The first is Franco Colapinto, who, despite finishing outside the points at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, is doing exceptionally well, putting pressure on a fast and experienced driver like Alex Albon. We will see how the season progresses, but if he maintains this level, it's hard to believe he won't remain in Formula One next year. The second is Daniel Ricciardo, who seems to have reached the end of his career in the top motorsport series. Objectively, this doesn't seem particularly unfair. The Australian has had his chances, but lately he hasn't shown the speed, and Formula One doesn't care about sentimentality. Almost everyone will say that the circus will miss him for his character. But let us say that what we've missed for so long are his braking techniques, although perhaps there's a curious tradition in Australia regarding this, since Oscar Piastri, the rising Australian star, also seems phenomenal at managing late braking.